So here we are in Logic Pro, and I've got the enveloper or enveloper, however you want to pronounce it, open here. And I've got this drum loop, and I'm going to play this drum loop without the enveloper on, so it's bypassed. So here we go. So hopefully you can hear that. There's a lot of reverb on the toms, on the snare, and some other percussion in there as well. And we're going to use the enveloper now to attenuate and reduce that reverb. So let's enable the enveloper. And I've got the default settings here at the moment. And the first parameter we need to look at is the threshold. So if you've watched episode 145, you'll be familiar with it. But basically, just set it at -100 dB. And that way, any signal that exceeds that threshold is going to have its attack and release portion of that signal. That envelope is going to be manipulated by the enveloper here. So just set it at -100. Obviously, you can change it, but for the default, in this instance, for what we're doing, we'll just leave it at -100. And the look ahead as well, it's at 1 millisecond. You can probably drag that down to 0. I don't particularly need it in this because there's not a lot of intricate transient stuff going on that I need the look ahead for. So the next parameter we're going to look at is the gain slider on this enveloper for this release section. And if we boost the gain, it's going to accentuate the release phase of the signal. And if we reduce the gain, it's going to attenuate the release phase of the signal. And thus, it will become drier. And you'll see what I mean. We're going to remove that reverb. We're going to attenuate that release phase of this drum loop. And it will start to sound drier. So I'm going to drag it all the way down gradually, and you'll see what I mean. So I dragged it all the way down to -100%, and it was too much. It's too much, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it back up and find a happy medium between it sounding dry, but I also still want to hear, well, I want to hear more of that release phase of this signal. Otherwise, it just sounds too cut off, right? So I'm going to drag it back up. We're probably looking at about -50 to -60%. So let's give it a go. So I settled on -60%. So we can still hear some of that reverb. Certainly not as much as before, but I'm hearing more of the release phase as well. So the release time is the time it takes for the signal at maximum gain to fall to the threshold level, basically, which in this instance is -100 dB. And I'm going to gradually increase it just to tighten up that reverb tail, but I still want that release phase of the signal. So it's at 200 milliseconds at the moment, and I'm going to gradually increase it until it just tightens up that reverb tail. So I've got it set there, 660 milliseconds. I'm happy with that at the moment because I can imagine if I were to put this loop in a whole mix, there's still a tiny bit of reverb there, but it's certainly less than what was before, and it would get lost in the mix, basically, lost in the shuffle, let's say. So let's A/B it. So I'll disable the enveloper. I'm going to play it without, and this is what it sounds like. So those toms, you can really hear the reverb. So listen out for the toms. So dung, dung, and now I'm going to turn the enveloper on. So listen out for the toms again. You can really hear that reverb tail is gone. Yeah, it's really attenuated that. So Logic's unsung hero, the enveloper. We can use the attack to boost the attack phase of a signal to add a bit of thwack, some punch. And we can use the release phase or the release side of this enveloper, manipulate the release phase to then remove reverb from a drum loop. Give it a go, folks. The unsung hero, the often overlooked enveloper in Logic Pro.